Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be alone, so alone that every creak of the floorboards feels like a reminder that no one is coming? Clara Wynnfield knew that silence too well. Years of whispers in Redwillow Town branded her a widow to be pitied, a woman to be distrusted. She built her life back on the windswept plains with only her bees, her chickens, and the unending weight of her own name. But what happens when the very solitude you've clung to is broken, when two strangers ride in from the horizon, asking for shelter? Would you turn them away, knowing the town already watches your every move, or would you let them stay, risking more gossip, more judgment, but also maybe finding something you had lost long ago belonging? Put yourself in her place. Imagine the lantern light flickering across your porch, your heart torn between fear and a faint, impossible hope. Would you have the courage to open your door tonight? We invite you to step into Clara's world, where choices carry the weight of survival and where love might rise from the ashes of shame. If this story stirs something in you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let's begin. The wind carried more than dust that evening. It carried omen, memory, and the faint stirring of something long left asleep. Clara Wynnfield stood in her garden, her palms pressed deep into the soil where thyme grew wild along the fence. Bees drifting from stem to stem as if whispering prayers. The August air was dry, not cruel, but worn thin. Her braid was loosening, though she had no will to fix it. She was used to quiet, but today the silence pressed heavier, like the earth itself held its breath. From the rise above Wynnfield homestead, two riders appeared massive, motionless as statues. Clara caught sight of them from the corner of her eye and froze, her fingers still buried in the dirt. They made no sound, raised no greeting. They sat tall on horses that looked as if carved from black stone. With the sun at their backs, their shadows stretched long across the trail, and for a breath Clara wondered if they were phantoms, some dream set loose to ache the heart. Slowly she rose, brushing her palms against her apron. Her rifle rested by the door, but she didn't reach for it. Not yet. The men rode down with the calm authority of those who never asked, they told. One was broader than any man she had seen, shoulders like canyon walls, his stillness unsettling. The other, leaner, with sharp edges and eyes that caught everything, like a hawk watching the wheat shift in the wind. She stepped onto her porch before they reached the fence. Her voice was quiet but steady, carrying the weariness of a woman long left to her own company. This land isn't for sale. The broad man said nothing. He reined in his horse and gave a single nod. The younger one tilted his head and spoke with a hint of a smile. We're not buying, just need water, maybe some shade for the horses. Won't be here long. Clara hesitated. Her boots felt nailed to the porch boards. She glanced behind her as if someone might answer for her, but there was no one, only the hum of bees, the cluck of hens, and the sagging bones of a house she had kept alone for 6 years. There's a trough, she said at last, shade under the willow. The two dismounted with quiet respect. No dust kicked up, no stomping hooves. Even the horses seemed careful. Clara narrowed her eyes as the big man untied his canteen, leading his mount gently to the water. The younger one followed, half amused, offering her a fleeting grin. She did not ask their names, nor did she offer food. Still, something about the giant Apache pausing at her porch steps unsettled her. He removed his boots, brushed the dust from them, and set them neatly by the stairs before sitting beneath the willow. Her chest fluttered at the gesture. Though she disliked the feeling, it was not fear, not shame, something else entirely. Inside. She set water to boil out of habit, only to stop halfway through measuring the tea. No, they weren't hers to welcome. They'd drink and leave. That was all. But evening softened across the valley and they lingered. The younger man, restless, paced along her fence line, inspecting the boards and nodding as though noting repairs. The larger one sat unmoving beneath the tree, heavy as stone, yet somehow watching everything. Clara gathered eggs, humming to herself. She noticed, absurdly, that she had tied on her clean apron. She hadn't meant to. It just happened. As she came back across the yard, a voice startled her. "You keep bees." The deep voice belonged to the broad man. His English was slow, deliberate, shaped by silence but firm. She blinked, gave a short nod. "They mind their own if you mind yours." He looked toward the hives. "They listen when you sing." Clara's heart skipped. She hadn't realized she'd been humming. It was her mother's song, an old tune once sung while kneading bread. Clara had carried it alone for years. The younger man crouched by the chicken coop, grinning. "That gate's about to fall clean off. I can fix it if you like." Her arms folded. "You two always offer so politely when showing up uninvited." He laughed, warm and genuine. "Would it work better if we didn't?" A smile threatened, but she forced it back. "Do as you want with the gate. Just don't touch my bees." He gave a mock salute and went to work, humming badly out of tune. That night, they built a fire near the edge of the yard. Not close enough to intrude, not far enough to be strangers. Clara didn't join them. She watched from her window. She saw the big man, Stone Walker. The name came to her unbidden, lift his face to the stars as though remembering. The younger Rowan Pike, light and restless, tossed twigs into the flames, waiting for a tale the night might bring. Clara lay down with that image burned into her mind. Two strangers, one rooted like a tree, the other restless as a bird. And for the first time in years, there was a flicker of warmth in her yard. The old house creaked that night as if learning how to breathe again. The old house moaned that night as though it were stretching limbs unused for too long. Clara Wynnfield lay on her side, her back turned to the door, one hand resting on the empty pillow where no voice had spoken in years. Since her husband's death, the room had known only silence, dust, and the faint hum of spiders weaving in the corners. She felt no fear, but peace did not sit with her either. Something had shifted, though she could not yet name it. When dawn came, it spilled a copper glow across the porch boards. The air carried the smoke of a small fire mixed with the scent of fresh sage. Stepping outside, Clara caught sight of Stonewalker by the barn. He swung the axe with a calm rhythm, each strike steady and patient. It was not violence, only necessity, like a man breathing. Near the chicken coop, Rowan Pike crouched with a ball of twine in his hands, lips moving to a tale he seemed to be spinning for his own amusement. Neither man looked her way when she came out. Somehow that unsettled her more than if they had greeted her directly. She cleared her throat. "You two plan to cling here like moss. Or are you moving on before long?" Stone paused mid-swing. He wiped his brow, his face impassive, and answered without turning. "Today is a good day for mending." The words landed with weight, and Clara realized the worst of it. She did not want them to leave. The truth frightened her more than any gossip ever had. more than the memory of the rope that had scarred her name, more than the 6 years of hard silence she had carried. The days that followed drifted by like a shallow stream moving over dry stone. Necessary, quiet, yet softened by a new presence she hadn't asked for. She woke earlier than she had in years, listening for boots on the dirt outside, for the groan of the chicken pen door. She told herself it was caution. Yet caution did not explain why she braided her hair tighter each morning, nor why she laid out the blue cotton dress that had not touched her shoulders since the county fair 4 years before. Stone Walker spoke little. He asked nothing, offered no unneeded words. He simply moved with a grace that startled her, as though each corner of her homestead had been waiting for him to step upon it with that kind of reverence. He chopped wood the way other men prayed. When the axe split through a knot, he would pause, run his hand over the grain, then continue as though reading scripture written by the land itself. Rowan Pike was the opposite. He filled the air with chatter, whistled when his hands were busy, sang off key while fixing the boards on her chicken pen or cleaning out the rain barrel. He told her stories of roads she had never traveled and faces she would never meet. Sometimes his talk drew laughter from her before she realized she was laughing. Other times she shut the door, breathing deep to steady herself. But the quiet that remained when she stepped back out was no longer the same quiet she had once known. It was gentler. Passing Stone on the porch, Clara often received nothing more than a nod. Yet the nod carried the weight of acknowledgment, not of her presence, but of her endurance. One morning, Rowan brought her 3 eggs in a tin cup. "The fattest hens always like me best," he teased. Clara arched a brow. "Is that so? Can't blame them," he said with a shrug. "I speak hen." She did not trust either man fully, not yet. Still, when they left for long rides to Ash Hollow Creek or wandered toward the Stone Ridge Hills, she found herself missing the sound of them. She noticed how Stone scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing before a storm, as though he understood the land's language without naming it. She noticed, too, how Rowan often positioned himself between her and the road, like a sentry pretending otherwise. Redwillow Town began to notice them as well. It started small. Clara had sent jars of preserves with young Eli Turner, the boy who delivered her supplies twice each month. The basket came back unopened. Inside lay a folded note, "Find other trade." She stared at it for a long time before burning it in the stove. Later that week, she rode into town for feed. No one met her eyes. At the Mercantile, Martha Keene stood arms crossed, her voice pitched just loud enough for others to hear. "Some folks invite danger the way they invite dust," she said. "Can't be shocked when it settles in their house." Clara gave no reply. She bought what she needed, paid in coin, and rode home slow, letting the words ride with her like stones in her pocket. That evening she found Stone on the porch, sharpening his knife. She stood near him, both of them staring at the strip of red sky fading behind the oaks. "You stay too long," she said quietly. "They'll start using my name again." He did not glance up. Let them. It was no defense, simply truth. Clara lowered herself onto the step beside him. Her knees cracked like old hinges. "My husband died with rope around his neck," she whispered. "They said I helped him steal a horse. I didn't. I just didn't know what he was. Thought love meant standing beside him, even when the rope came." Stone let the knife rest in his palm. "You still stand." She turned her face toward the darkening fields. Not for long, I think. He made no move to touch her, but something passed between them. Not pity, not comfort, but recognition of pain carried alone, of survival without audience. The next morning, Rowan knocked at her door holding a wooden spoon. Need a second opinion. He grinned. Tried making coffee, but it tastes like wagon grease. She blinked, then stepped aside. He entered as though he had always belonged there. She poured proper coffee into 2 tin mugs. He took a sip, shivered, and laughed. Mercy, that's the real thing. She studied him, then asked, "Why are you truly here?" Rowan tilted his head, thoughtful. We were heading south. Then his horse turned. Stone doesn't go where he isn't meant to. And you, she pressed. I go where there's music or trouble. You've got both. She almost smiled despite herself. Later, when she stepped out to the porch again, she found Stone carving on a strip of bark. She leaned closer. The shape was not English letters, but a curved mark like wind through branches. "What does it say?" she asked. He looked up. Clara, her breath caught. "It means survivor," he said after a pause. "It is the name we give to those who do not bow, not even to storms." She held the bark in her hand, warm from the sun, heavier than anything she had carried in years. Later that week, young Eli Turner came up the lane, his shoulders hunched as though bracing against words he had not spoken yet. He shifted from one boot to the other before holding out a sack of seeds. "Mama told me not to come," he said, eyes darting toward the barn. "Folks are talking. They say you've taken in." His voice trailed off. Clara Wynnfield straightened, her chin lifting with quiet resolve. "They can say I've welcomed men who show respect, men who work harder than those who turn their backs on me." Eli's cheeks reddened. Didn't mean any harm. Her voice softened. "I know. Eli, tell your mother her jars are clean. She can keep them." He hesitated at the steps. "Are they staying? I don't know," Clara said truthfully, "but I won't send them away." When the boy rode off, she turned and caught sight of Stonewalker standing in the barn doorway, arms crossed, silent as shadow. He hadn't interrupted, yet she knew he had heard every word. That night, the 3 of them gathered by the fire. The evening air carried a faint chill, though the flames were enough to hold it at bay. Rowan Pike drew a small flute from his pocket, coaxing a wandering melody from its hollow bone. Clara found herself humming under her breath, an old tune her mother once sang. Stone stirred the coals with deliberate care, his dark gaze lost in thought. Clara's eyes shifted to the shadows on the barn wall, their forms leaning toward one another, less strangers than they had been. She broke the silence. "Tell me what you see when you look at me." Stone's face did not change. His answer came measured and sure. A house with the door locked, but light still shining through the window. Rowan chuckled into his tin cup. "I see someone who needs more than chickens and bees." Clara held both their gazes, unflinching. The quiet that followed did not feel like emptiness anymore. It was deliberate, a choice, the space where strangers turn into something else. Not long after, a jar slipped from her damp hands. The sound of glass breaking was not sharp, not loud, only the quiet crack of something surrendering after holding on too long. Honey spread across the floor in golden strands, glinting in the afternoon light like sorrow too heavy to stop. Clara did not curse, did not scramble to clean. She simply stood, palms open, staring at the ruin of her work. It wasn't about the honey. It had never been about the honey. The house seemed to hold its breath with her. Outside, the wheat whispered, and a hen clucked as though searching for complaint. Inside, her chest hollowed with a familiar ache, not grief, not anger, but the deep fatigue of a woman unseen for far too long. She lowered herself to her knees slowly, as though surrendering. The wooden floor pressed hard against her bones. Fingers trembled as she reached for the shards, her calm masking the sadness she carried. A shadow crossed the doorway. She did not look up. Stone Walker entered without a word, without clearing his throat. He crouched beside her, a mountain brought low, and took her hand gently. She tried to pull away, but his hold was soft, steady just enough to let her know she was not alone. Small cuts lined her skin, red beads rising where glass had kissed her. Stone unwrapped a strip of worn cloth from his pocket. It smelled faintly of smoke and earth. With care he wrapped her fingers, binding them as though they were something precious. "They said I poisoned him," Clara whispered at last. "That's what they told the priest after my husband died." Stone said nothing. "He died in front of me, not from poison, but from the life he chose, from lies, from men who needed someone to blame. But they whispered it anyway. Said I was unnatural, said I did not cry loud enough." Stone's hands stilled for a moment, then resumed. His silence weighed more than comfort could. "I did not poison him," Clara breathed. "I know," he answered, low and certain. Those two words struck harder than every accusation she had endured. She lifted her eyes to his. They were dark and steady, carrying neither pity nor judgment. He simply saw her the ache, the anger, the weary dignity. Her breath shook. "Why did you stay?" He thought a long while before speaking. "Because your land sings." She blinked. "You walk it like you remember every herd it held." He continued, "And still you keep planting." She found no reply. Later, she noticed the floor had been cleaned. On the counter sat a small wooden bowl filled with honey Stone must have gathered from the mess. Beside it lay a strip of bark etched with a curved line like wind bending through trees. She touched it with her bandaged finger. "What does it mean?" she had once asked him. "Clara," he had said. "It means survivor." The sun cast long shadows across the porch as Rowan Pike returned from Redwillow Town. Dust on his boots and a grin that failed to reach his eyes. "They're talking louder now," he said. Clara poured him coffee. "About what?" He lifted a brow. "About me. About him. About chickens. Mostly. Funny how strange it all looks from the outside. Tell me, does it look strange to you?" She studied him. No stranger than a man who listens to bees or a woman who trusts ghosts. Rowan gave a crooked smile, but quickly grew serious. "Martha Keene said, if Stone's still here by week's end, she'll send word to the marshal. Claims you're turning your place into a fort for heathens." Clara's grip on the kettle tightened. "I'm not turning it into anything." It was quiet. It was mine. Rowan leaned back. "Now it's alive. That's what frightens them." She turned her gaze on him. "And you, are you afraid?" He gave her a long look, half teasing, half earnest, of a little of you. Terrified. Their laughter rose, brief and unguarded, vanishing like mist but lingering in her chest. The next evening, Clara carried out a pot of stew, thick with potatoes and herbs, setting it on the porch without ceremony. Rowan cracked a joke about being spoiled. Stone bowed his head, saying nothing, and ate in silence. They did not build a fire that night. Instead, they sat facing the horizon, each wrapped in thought, while stars blinked into being overhead. After a long silence, Clara spoke. "Do you think people ever change?" Rowan answered first, words quick and certain. "People don't change. They reveal." Stone did not speak right away. For a moment she thought he might let it pass. Then his voice came steady. "They change. Not by words, by what they carry." Clara's chest tightened. "And what do I carry?" Stone met her eyes. "Shame that was never yours, and hope you do not name." The porch boards creaked under their weight as the wind whispered through the wheat. Clara found herself wanting to tell him everything that she once sang in church before they turned their backs, that she still wrote letters to no one, that some nights she lit 2 candles, one for her dead husband and one for the woman she might have been. But she stayed quiet. The truth would come in its time. Rowan Pike had spoken quick, his grin easy, his words teasing. People don't change. They only show who they really are. Stone Walker stayed silent so long, Clara thought he would let the moment slip past. Then his voice came, deep and steady. "They do change, not by talk, by the weight they carry." Clara's throat tightened. "And what do I carry?" His dark eyes settled on her, unwavering. "Shame that never belonged to you, and hope you won't speak aloud." The wind moved across the wheat, and the porch groaned beneath them, as if the land itself bore witness. Clara wanted to pour it all out, the years of silence, the way she once sang in the church before they turned their backs, the letters she still wrote to no one, the 2 candles she sometimes lit at night, one for her dead husband, another for the woman she might have been if he had not dragged her name into ruin. But she swallowed the confession. She rose, gathered the bowls, and whispered, "Good night." Before she could close the door, Stone stood as well, just long enough to say, "You are not alone in this house." She slept fitfully. Dreams crowded her, voices she had not heard in years echoing through her mind. When she woke, the bandage on her hand was fresh, and someone had laid sprigs of sage on her window ledge. She smiled in spite of herself, and outside the bees buzzed louder, as if the world had decided to notice her again. No invitation arrived for the harvest dance. Clara had known it would not. That celebration was reserved for women who still wore ribbons in their hair, for men who tipped their hats to pastors without guilt weighing on them. It was never meant for a quiet widow with dust on her hem and 2 Apache men living on her land. Yet even knowing this, Clara lifted the blue dress from the bottom of her chest. She held it to the light, checked for moth holes, traced the stitching with her fingertips. It had been years since she had worn it before the rope, before the whispers, before her name became nothing but a scandal. She spread it across the bed, telling herself she was only letting the fabric breathe. Nothing more. Word of the dance carried through Redwillow Town quicker than usual. Gossip, sharpened by malice, often did. Eli Turner delivered feed a day early, his face uneasy as he passed her the sack. "Martha Keene says folks from 2 towns over are coming," he muttered. "She's been stringing up decorations herself." Clara tilted her head. "Martha's doing the decorating now." Eli managed a thin smile. "Says it's tradition. Says too many things are changing lately." He handed her a folded slip of paper, then hurried off before she could answer. Inside. Clara opened it. On one side was a clumsy sketch of a bee, the lines uneven but careful. On the back, in awkward handwriting, it read, "You still matter." That night, she stood before the mirror and slipped the blue dress over her shoulders. It still fit, though time had left its marks on her body in places no corset could smooth. She braided her hair and tucked a sprig of lavender behind her ear. Without a word, she stepped outside. Rowan Pike and Stone Walker sat by the fire. Rowan's jaw fell open. Well, I'll be he caught himself, grinning wide. Stone said nothing. He rose to his feet, quiet and steady. Clara walked past them both without explanation, boots crunching on dirt, the scent of lavender trailing behind. The ride into Redwillow Town was silent, save for the creak of the saddle and the crickets calling like judgment in the grass. Lanterns swung in the churchyard, casting halos of light across the dance floor. Laughter spilled into the night, warm and careless. Music drifted sweet and aching on the air, tugging at Clara's chest. She tied her horse at an unused hitch post and stepped into the glow. She had not come for conversation. She came because some part of her still stood barefoot in a summer field, believing that belonging might one day be hers again. Heads turned as she entered the light. Not a hand reached for hers. Martha Keene was the first to speak, her voice slick and sharp. Well, look at Clara Wynnfield in blue. Didn't think she'd dare show her face, not with her company still hanging around. Clara kept walking. She did not look left or right, though the words clung like burrs. She always did like attention, Martha added, her voice carrying. Even when her man dangled for theft, she wore lace to the hearing. A ripple of laughter followed, low and cutting. Clara nearly turned, but then 2 horses arrived, one black, one chestnut. The riders dismounted without a word. The crowd fell silent as if the music had been snuffed out. Stone Walker towered above them all, not dressed for dancing but in the same earth-toned clothes he always wore. Power coiled in stillness. A strip of red cloth was tied around his arm. Rowan Pike stood beside him, flashing a grin at a passing girl who quickly looked away. Clara's eyes found Stone's across the square. He nodded once. She did not know if it was a challenge or an invitation. But her feet moved before she thought. They did not meet in the center. Instead, they circled slowly, deliberately, a silent waltz. The townsfolk parted, uncertain whether to intervene or to watch. The music faltered, then resumed, but Clara and Stone did not dance to it. They walked, she in her blue dress, he at her side like a sentinel escorting a widow back into her own name. Whispers rose. It's disgraceful. Another murmured. She's done hiding. Clara heard every word, and she left them behind her. Halfway across the square, she stopped. Stone stopped too. Why did you come? She asked softly, not turning. His voice was low, steady. Because you did. She closed her eyes. They'll make it worse now. Maybe. You don't care. He paused. I've lived through worse. She drew a breath. So have I. Stone Walker let a pause stretch between them, his words settling heavy in the warm night. I've lived through worse. Clara Wynnfield released the breath she had been holding. So have I. A freckled girl, no older than 16, stepped shyly from the edge of the crowd. She held out a cup of cider with both hands, her knuckles white with nerves. Clara accepted it, not for the drink, but for the courage it carried. Behind her, Martha Keene hissed sharp enough for all to hear. Stone turned his gaze on her, not cruel, not furious, only the stare of a man weary of seeing women cut down for daring to stand tall. She has more courage than any man I've met, he said evenly. "You'd do well to remember that." The girl with the cider nodded once before retreating back into the lantern glow. That night, Clara rode home beneath a sky swollen with stars. Stone and Rowan rode ahead, giving her the space to breathe. The wind tugged at the hem of her dress, and for the first time in years she let it. When she dismounted at the porch, the lantern still burned. She sank to the steps, the cider cup warm in her hand, and whispered into the dark. I remembered myself tonight. Stone came up behind her. He didn't sit. Instead, he placed a flat stone beside her, smooth as glass, with a mark carved across its face. She traced it with her thumb. Survivor. The dance had not wanted her. The town had not welcomed her. Yet, under the lantern light and the long, quiet walk home, Clara Wynnfield had stopped apologizing for taking up space. They came just after midday. 3 riders trailing dust and the stink of whiskey. Their horses kicked up the kind of dirt that settles into a man's soul when he's too long without honest work. Clara spotted them from her porch, squinting into the haze of heat. She knew their type well enough, drifters with nothing left to mend but their own bitterness. Men who saw a woman alone and mistook silence for weakness. Rowan Pike had left early that morning, claiming he knew where wild plums grew along Stone Ridge Hills. Stone Walker remained, working at the fence where the wind had loosened another slat. Clara had offered him water. He had nodded once before returning to his task. Now, as the riders drew near, Stone straightened. The hammer remained in his hand. He didn't hurry. He didn't need to. The men swung down from their saddles with sloppy bravado, boots thudding against the hard earth. The leader, a thick-necked brute named Hank Redder, spat into the dust and tugged at his belt. His eyes flicked from Clara to Stone and back again. "Well, ain't this a sight?" he drawled, voice thick with mockery. "The widow, Wynnfield, and her pet savage. Heard tell you, let him sleep on the porch. Or is it in your bed these days?" Clara stood at the edge of the porch, hands still at her sides. She gave him nothing, not her voice, not her shame. Redder chuckled, glancing toward his companions, encouraged by their silence. Funny how folks forget decency when they get lonely. Guess Martha was right. You're not too picky anymore. The words, cut sharp, meant to slice her open before the world. Clara felt the old sting rise, the cold creep of humiliation threading through her bones. But she held herself still, chin high, refusing to bend. Stone Walker stepped forward then. No words yet, only presence. His shadow stretched long across the yard. Redder looked up at him, smirk curling. "What's it gonna be? You gonna grunt at me, boy, or just stare until I beg pardon?" Stone's voice came low, unhurried. "You rode here looking for noise. You've already made it." Redder snorted. That a threat, Stone's eyes didn't move. "No, I'm asking if you're finished." Something in his stillness unsettled the men, a quiet so heavy it carried its own warning. Redder's grin faltered. His companions shifted uneasily. "She's not yours to protect." Redder blustered, louder now. "She's nothing." Stone's reply was calm as stone. "She's more woman than you are, man." The yard froze. Even the wind seemed to pause. Redder's hand twitched toward his coat pocket too quick, too reckless. Stone moved before thought. The hammer left his grip like a bolt of judgment, striking the dirt inches from Redder's boot with a heavy, final thud. Not an attack, a warning. The kind a fool ignores only once. It was not a weapon, it was a warning. The kind only a fool would ignore. Hank Redder froze mid-motion, his hand hovering near his coat pocket. Stone Walker's voice cut the silence. "Get off her land, and don't ride back." Redder's gaze slid toward Clara Wynnfield, hoping she would break, hoping she would beg. But Clara did not move. Her face held firm, like a wall of stone catching the last light of fire. What had once been shame now burned as defiance, and Hank saw it clear enough. Muttering curses, he swung back into the saddle. His men followed, each one less certain than before. Not one of them looked over their shoulder. When the dust settled, Stone turned to Clara. "You all right?" She nodded, though her hands trembled at her sides. "You stood taller than they did," he told her. Her breath caught. "I've been standing alone for a long time. Not today," he said simply. That night, Rowan Pike returned, his sack of wild plums forgotten as soon as Clara told him what had happened. "Wish I'd been here," he muttered. "I'd have thrown my boot at Redder's skull." Clara smiled faintly. "Stone handled it." Rowan shook his head, glancing between them. He usually does. They shared supper under the open sky. No fire, only stars overhead and the steady sound of the wind weaving through the wheat. After Rowan went inside, Clara remained on the porch with Stone. The night wrapped around them like an old quilt stitched by memory. "I was afraid," she admitted at last. "Not of them, of what I might have done if no one had stopped them." "You'd have stood your ground," Stone answered. She looked at him, her voice low. "And if they'd heard you—" He only shrugged, as though the risk was nothing, as though her safety weighed heavier than his own. "You've given me peace," Clara whispered. "I never thought I'd find that again." Stone finally turned his head, his gaze steady. "Peace is something you make. I only helped." She reached out, her fingers brushing his. The touch was simple, unplanned, yet full of meaning. He didn't pull away. In the days that followed, Clara began carving again. It had been years since she last took a knife to wood, back before the rope of rumor had twisted her name into scandal. She started small, a spoon, a bowl, little things to steady her hands. Then she shaped a sign for the gate. Wynnfield Homestead. Beneath it, she carved the words, "All are welcome who mean no harm." She hung it with Stone's help, the two of them working in companionable silence while the sun dropped low behind Stone Ridge Hills. The folks of Redwillow Town started to nod to her again. A cautious nod, but not nothing. A pie left on her porch one morning. A packet of seeds slipped into Rowan's hand when he came back from errands. The change was slow, but real. The way seasons shift without notice until one day you realize the light falls differently. Clara changed too, not by marriage papers or whispered courtship, but by the steady daily restoration of her own voice, her own name. The story of Clara Wynnfield is not only about hardship on the frontier. It is about the resilience of the human spirit. Many of us, especially as we grow older, know what it feels like to carry memories that others cannot see, and to live with silence that weighs heavier than words. Clara reminds us that even when the world misjudges us, even when whispers try to define who we are, dignity is something no one can take unless we surrender it. Her journey shows that companionship can arrive when we least expect it, and that strength is not always about standing alone. It is about standing with the right people when storms come. For those of us in our later years, the lesson is clear. It is never too late to reclaim our voice, to open our hearts to kindness, and to discover peace again. life continues to offer moments of healing, if we have the courage to see them. Thank you, dear friends, for spending this time with us and walking alongside Clara's story. If it touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who may need its message, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next story. Your support keeps these voices alive.